Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be sharing about a message that God has given to me, and that is enjoy the journey. So in the way God spoke to me, this message was, he was basically telling me to slow down, the importance of enjoying this life that we have. And sometimes when God reveals things to us and he already shows you a part of your life that he has waiting for you, and it seems like your patience begins to be worked on. Even me in my everyday life, I feel like I have to remind myself, I know God reminds me to slow down when it comes to trying to be productive, just get from point A to point B. Sometimes I can get a little too much of it in a rush that I miss out on certain things that maybe God wanted me to enjoy, maybe to, I don't know, look at, like they say the saying, smell the flowers. So one thing he was reminding me of was something that he showed me a while back. He kept highlighting Route 66. So I started to look into it. I started to study a little bit on that. It was interesting that, obviously we have 66 books in the Bible. And so when I began to study this, it was interesting how God was highlighting how when they started to build this road, they built it from the right to the left. Like in the Middle East, when they read from right to left. And this is how this road was built. It started in Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and then California. And so God was showing me just these little, these interesting facts. So if you're hearing this in the spirit, you can see a little bit of why God was highlighting these things. So in the 1930s, it was a primary route for migration of farm workers and also for moving military equipment across the country. So he was using this to kind of like get my attention to, when comparing this road to our journey, to our walk. One movie that he highlighted that he wanted me to watch was Cars. And so I began to watch this movie and kind of write notes, whatever that was highlighted. So if you watch the movie, you know that it's about race cars, it's about racing. What God really highlighted was this actor that voiced Lightning McQueen. His name is Owen Wilson. Now the name Owen kept coming to me. And so Owen means young warrior. And you notice in the movie they kept calling Lightning McQueen a rookie. So he was just getting into his career. And so one thing that God really highlighted was, whenever I think of this actor, I think of his nose. So God was highlighting his nose. His nose had been broken twice before he became famous. So if you notice, he has a crooked nose. And so we know the nose, it represents discernment. And because his nose was crooked, it's almost like his discernment was not where it was supposed to be. He was not equipped just yet when it came to discerning the godly way of doing things versus the worldly things. And so looking at this character, you see he's immature, he's very careless. His own mentality is just win, win, win. There was a part in the movie where he was rushing, every time they do a lap, they're supposed to give him new tires. Well, he decided that he was going to go ahead and not get tires so he can get ahead of the other car. But then his tires end up blowing up. But somehow he still made it to the finish line, which was a tie. So it was 3 cars that were in a tie. Because there was a tie, they have to do another race. So they start traveling by night. To go to the other race. Now he has to go into a semi, kind of pretty much right in the container to go to where they need to go. But he tells the semi, hey, we're not going to stop to rest. We're going to be ahead of the game. We're going to beat everybody. So the semi is passing by all the other semi with their cars inside. and they're all taking naps. Well, he was not about to do that. He talks the semi into keep on driving. So then the semi ends up falling asleep on the road. Lightning McQueen ends up falling out. And one thing about Lightning McQueen is that he has no lights. He's a car of performance. Somebody mentioned something like that. They're saying, why do you have no lights? And he says, well, because the racetrack is always lit. Like he's rolling his eyes, like saying, I don't need lights. But here he is in this situation where it's dark outside. The semi took off. He didn't know that he had lost him. And so he's freaking out. He's speeding everywhere. And then he gets pulled over in this little town. And then in that area, it happens to be a part of Route 66. And so this is the desert. Not only does he get pulled over for speeding, but he also messes up the road. And so the next day he has to go to court, and they tell him that he has to fix the road. So in his mind, he's freaking out because he knows he has to make it for this race, but he's being held back because of what happened. So now he's forced to be in this little town where he meets different cars, and he ends up meeting what would be his tribe. You know, what God was showing me was that he was very upset that he was being held back, but he didn't realize that he was about to meet so many cars that he was going to become a team. They were going to be able to help him along the way. You know, he didn't have any real friends where he began. You know, they were all just business. And so in this spot, it seems like, you know, he was meeting all the right people. He met, you know, the goofy best friend, which they call Mater. And then he meets the different car shops, which there's one for the tires, one for the paint, one for the fuel. And then he meets his girlfriend, which happens to be a rest stop. So he's throwing his fit at the beginning, but then he realizes he's developing these friendships. And then there's Doc Hudson. He realizes that, you know, at first he was trying to give him advice on how to race. And he was kind of like, yeah, what do you know? You know, you don't know what you're talking about. But then he realizes that this is an experienced race car that has been away from the game for a long time. And so he realizes, okay, this is somebody who I can learn from. So, you know, he sees that he has those 3 piston cups, and, you know, he was confused, and he was saying, okay, why did you disappear? Why didn't you come back? And he was saying that, you know, that kind of business, it wasn't a friendly one. You know, he used to be a really, you know, on fire, you know, race car. You know, he used to be really into the racing too. But then he realized, you know, after he had a really bad accident, and then he tried to come back and they didn't want him. They pretty much replaced him. And so he was telling him, you know, trying to give him advice and saying, it's just an empty cup. So like saying the goals that you're reaching for is just empty. And so another scene, you know, he spends time with his girlfriend, and she's showing him around, and she's giving him the history of the Route 66. And she's telling him, you know, that she found the love of, you know, the view, she found family where she was at, and she didn't want to go back. So when she was giving him the history, you know, she was trying to get him to appreciate the time that he was there and the friendships that he was developing. And so she was saying that Route 66 used to be really, you know, fun, adventurous, and famous, but then they made another route, and it was just to save people 10 minutes of driving, which that cut off a lot of the adventure, the experience that they could have had. So then God was speaking to me about Doc Hudson. So again, remember that Owen means young warrior. Okay, so he has that fire in him, but he's still not experienced. So the thing about Doc Hudson is that the actor's name is Paul Newman. Okay, so Paul means humble. And then you see his last name, New Man. So humble, new man. So this is somebody that is experienced, that knows the importance of life. You know, he took what he could get out of the racing, but then he realized that it was empty. So he developed a really good relationship with Doc Hudson. And so you see the maturity, you see the inspiration, because, you know, here Doc Hudson has been there and done that, and he's able to coach him and teach him things. And so he appreciates everything, he develops those relationships, and he promises that he's going to come back and put them back on the map. And so he prepares again, he gets the road fixed, and then he goes back to the race. The two other cars that are in the race, one is the rival, which is evil, and then the other one is an older car, kind of like Doc Hudson. And so he's racing against these two. Now, they start getting to the last lap, and the rival, the evil one, ends up wrecking into the older car and making him crash. At this time, Lightning McQueen is about to cross the finish line. But then when he catches that from the side of his view, he sees what the evil car did. He stops and he goes back and he helps the other car and he pushes him to the finish line. So the evil car ended up getting first place, and then it was the older car getting second place because Lightning McQueen was pushing him to the finish line, and then Lightning McQueen got third place. So everybody is witnessing what that time in the desert did. You know, it got him to appreciate, it got him to mature, taught him what real winning was. And so at the end of this, the evil car ends up getting booed. And even though Lightning McQueen didn't win first place, they treated him as if he did. So he still got all the sponsorship, he still got all the attention, all whatever he wanted. But because he had learned everything that he was supposed to in that time on Route 66. Okay, so, you know, two of the songs that came on this movie, Life is a Highway, and then Life Could Be a Dream. And then, of course, they have another song called Route 66. So all these songs is like basically saying, enjoy your time. It's not so much about the destination, it's the journey. You know, sometimes when God gives us, you know, insight, when it comes to, you know, when it comes to prophetic words about us knowing what he's going to do, what we're called to, it feels like sometimes in our mind we can be so eager to get there. And he doesn't want us to have that mindset. He wants us to enjoy our time here. So what came to me was Hebrews 12 verse 1. And I know in other versions it doesn't say patience, but in the King James Version it does say run with patience. And that's one thing that we have to learn about this walk, is that not only to endure, but to have patience with ourselves, with the process that we're in, because there's beauty in it. Everything that God has called you to be, the steps that you're making, he's saying run with patience. Just enjoy the sightseeing, enjoy the people around you, enjoy the place where you're at, because there's certain things that you're going to miss and you're going to wish that you enjoyed it more. So with this, I pray that this blessed you guys. If you have a comment, leave it down below, and I will see you in the next video. God bless.